Firstly, if you were listening to yesterday's show, thank you, you'll know we were speaking at one point about the need for government to build more homes, social housing. Well, the government has another challenge on housing to contend with as it faces a showdown in the High Court. Here's former Housing Secretary Michael Gove, a Tory, responding to the notion that some of the country's wealthiest landowners are going to attempt to thwart the will of the people by challenging the new Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act passed by the last government.
If it is the case that some of these organisations want to challenge what we're doing in court, let them. If they want to say, we want to stand on the side of greed and exploitation, fine, let them make that case in court. To my mind, the whole point about Parliament is to represent the people of this country, and the overwhelming majority of people who are involved in the world of home ownership are people who are doing the right thing, and we've got to be on their side.
Well, as predicted, a group of 6 wealthy freeholders are indeed challenging the Act as being incompatible with their human rights. But a coalition of the country's leading leaseholder campaign groups has banded together in the High Court last Friday to fight back. How did they get on? Well, I'm joined by housing campaigner Harry Scoffin. Nice to see you. In the studio as well, Harry. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me back for round 2.
Round 2. How many rounds is this going to go? Don't answer that. Why have you banded together?
Because we felt this is a multi-billion-pound industry and that Michael Gove, or Lord Gove, was correct. This is going to run on and on for years. Parliament's been looking at trying to get rid of this leasehold system since the 1880s, before working men and women had the right to vote. And it is an absolutely obscene classist system that deprives people of owning the land in this country. And actually, we got thrown out on Friday. The judge, and I'm not to criticise the judge, I support rule of law, we accept the decision, we're not going to appeal it, said we didn't have any money, we were too late in the day. But that's what it takes to take a case like this to the High Court. We tried to be an intervener to actually give leaseholders a voice, and the full hearing is in July. There is not going to be a single leaseholder voice in that case. And yet, what about our human rights? What about our property rights? And actually, there's a wider debate. Let's forget about leasehold for a second, about there is the will of the people or the elites. If Parliament makes a decision, surely that should be respected. So our view is that this issue that affects over 5 million households across England and Wales and the wider economy, because the flats market is on its knees, people are boycotting flats, biggest gap with house prices in 30 years, it's one for Parliament. It is not one to be weaponised through the judiciary. And that's exactly what the big freeholders are doing. And they're going to take it all the way to Strasbourg, to the European Court of Human Rights. I could be an old man by the time this thing is concluded. And that is obscene. The rest of the world do not have leasehold. Everyone owns their flats, they own their homes, they're masters of their own destiny. And they're a little bit like Alan Sugar on The Apprentice. If they're getting ripped off, and I'm sorry it's BBC, but you say, you're fired. That's what we want. So the fact is, this has been decided by Parliament, cross-party support. Get on with it.
Let's for those who may not be fully up to speed, what has been happening in Parliament? What is the reform that is coming through?
So basically, there was a law that was passed just before the last election in a process called the wash-up, where it was sort of rushed through. But it was a process of 6-7 years of public consultation and research, very big reports from the Law Commission, which started in 2017. The fact is, all of the work had been done, and it hung in the balance when the election was called by Rishi Sunak, and there was a risk that it wasn't going to happen. Labour came to the rescue and said, we want this done before the election. This cannot drag on. And Michael Gove, or Lord Gove, basically pushed back and said, we need this done. And the fact is, it was the first law on leasehold in 22 years. So the fact is, we needed it done. Labour are now promising to go further. But the worry is that if the freeholders strike down these key parts of this legislation, we can forget about Commonhold, the better system, and further leasehold reform from Labour. So it's a big, big issue about democracy here.
Do you get another chance in the legal process, judicial review?
Well, I guess we could come back when it goes to the Supreme Court or maybe Strasbourg. But look, we don't have the resources. We were around Lincoln's Inn Field with a begging bowl. Most lawyers run a mile because you're taking on the establishment. So some of the claimants, Grosvenor Estate, famously owned by the Duke of Westminster. There's another one called Long Harbour, run by Will Astor, David Cameron's aristocratic half-brother-in-law. This is what we're up against, Matthew. So the fact is, and leaseholders don't have money. These are first-time buyers, first rung of the property ladder, or elderly that are downsizing. They don't want this hell in their lives.
I'm struggling to understand how the view of the leaseholders and their human rights couldn't be included in a hearing about the human rights of the freeholders. I mean, it just seems, that does seem Kafkaesque, absurd.
And I think that the argument for that, which is bizarre, but is that the judge was getting irritable with everyone, and actually he wasn't best pleased with the freeholders either, saying, look, there's a huge amount of documents, you're sort of bombarding the court here, let's make this very, very limited. And I think there's an argument that the judge is quite conservative, small c, doesn't want politics to get involved with this. He thinks, well, Parliament...
But it is politics,
Well, it is
Harry.
politics.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the joke of it. The freeholders can play politics, but the guys off the street, the leaseholders, can't. That's wrong. And there's a wider debate about, and I know you're going to probably say Daily Mail, but whether we leave the European Court of Human Rights, because I think there's going to be a debate now about actually this issue is safe in the domestic courts. We've got no idea what's going to happen when it goes to Strasbourg. And that's what the freeholders are counting on, that they're going to win in that final stage in a foreign court. And that is a huge issue.
And they can, they can fund it.
Yes.
So how is your coalition of groups that represent leaseholders, how are you funding your legal battle?
Well, literally pro bono. So the lawyers that we got, and I have to pay tribute to them, we've got Paul at Bymans and Mavis, we've also got incredible barristers at Thomas More Chambers, Laura and Jacob. The fact is, they're not just doing it for free, they're going up against the establishment. They're also going up against their own legal colleagues here. And they did it for free, but it took ages to get them because a lot of lawyers, to be fair to them, they ruled themselves out saying there's a conflict of interest. They've done advisory work for freeholders recently. Fair enough. But the point is, last point, because I know I've probably got to wrap it up, but the thing is that when the freeholders have got the money to get the King's Counsel, and I'm not talking about any old King's Counsel, I'm talking, and by the way, I'm not breaking any confidences here, it's all on the internet, but best friends of the Prime Minister, Edward Fitzgerald KC, his former boss at Doughty Street Chambers, wrote a book on the death penalty with Keir. Then you've got Mark Stevens that worked with Keir for many years on McLibel. That's what we're up against. And we're not saying there's some sort of conspiracy here.
Of course you wouldn't just say that because that would be highly litigious.
Yeah, 100%. But all we're saying is that it's not a fair fight. And actually, the freeholders lost a debate in the democracy. They lost a debate in Parliament with the government. They're trying to reopen it in the courts where they've got the edge. We don't have the edge in the courts. So what we're saying to the Labour government is find your steel. Look at Keir Starmer on the 2-child benefit cap. Fantastic. He's going up against the vested interest in the Treasury. We need that now on leasehold.
Oh, Harry, I hope you're right about the 2-child benefit cap. I really do. I wish you all the best. I have to say, it does seem an iniquitous position for leaseholders to be in, and you have my every sympathy. Harry Scoffin, housing campaigner, founder of Free Leaseholders. Thank you for joining us this Sunday morning. Good luck.